My name is Mazibuko Jara. I'm from the Zabala Institute. I have the unfortunate task of coming the session after our end and earlier, and then having to ensure that the students get to lunch in some good spirits. So please welcome us and let's see how it works. Land, housing, and space, and the urban economy. All of us, those are various things which have come up from yesterday. The overarching message, the abiding message from the discussions is that basically what we are seeing through all of those is the reproduction of apartheid. That's the loud and clear message from the room. Now there come political parties into that message. Political parties have power, particularly those who govern, and also those who are elected into council chambers. Now, Adam Hadith says that in the case of Southeast Asia, political parties were able to drive change and achieve significant development there because they feared the people. They feared to be removed from power by the people. Is that the case with our parties in South Africa? Parties have obligations to promote, to advance and realize the vision of a good and just society that the Constitution promises. And yet, often we see political parties at the opposite end of what that good and just vision is. In fact, many have argued here in this room that parties run a state that is failing the mandate of the Constitution. And it is no surprise that survey after survey, political parties are one of the least trusted institutions in our society. There's good grounds for that. So this session is putting political parties on the spot because of the dimension of power that they have, whether they govern or whether they're in opposition, because they've got significant impact on our lives. Now, one of the purposes of this session is to engage them, but also one of the ideas of the organizers of the event is that idea of a common charter, some charter that we can all commit to with regards to the various issues of land, housing, space, and the urban economy. So that's the purpose of our engagement now. In the panel is a number of representatives of the political parties. To my left is Carl Popem, a member of the Environment Committee in the city of Cape Town. Cameron Dagmo, a member of the provincial legislature. Not anymore. It says so here. That's fine. Sorry, Carl. National Assembly says I'm wrong. Representing the ANC. Brett Heron, member of the provincial legislature, representing Good. Muse Boy, a researcher and activist at Indifuna Ukwazi, Bertie Felke from the EFF. Let me see if I have the next colleague's name. Chairman Steenberg from the Patriotic Alliance, and Francesca Bisacci from Rise Mzansi. So that's the panel of people we have. I want to ask Muse first to frame the discussion. Muse, you've engaged as a researcher and activist, particularly the DA-led municipality here in Cape Town. I want you to refer to the research that Ndifuna Ukwazi did about pieces and parcels of land all over Cape Town and how that research reveals what political parties can do. So despite the critical perspective I put forward, but actually there's a role for political parties. What does that research tell us about the role of political parties who have power in particular, but also as you reflect on what that research tells us, but also give us a critical view from your experience, what actually a political party is doing or not doing to advance that vision of the Constitution.
Manja! Manja! No, Manja! No, thank you very much, Comrade Maz, for those questions. I think, comrades, it's very important that we contextualize the discussion. From yesterday, we spoke to the historical context, and I think it's important in this discussion when we're speaking about land redistribution and what is the role of political parties. This discussion that we're having, Comrade Maz, is a particular context set in history. And we must speak about that particular history because it continues to frame the discourse that we are continuing to pursue today. So the context that we find ourselves in can be found in the making of the South African working class. Because the original scene in this country is the land question. The original scene is land theft and land disposition. And that's a context that we must always speak to. And after 1867 or 1879, after the battle at Ulundi, white people controlled much of the land in this country through conquest. And that's a historical fact that we must speak to. And this historical fact that I was speaking about meant that a number of things happened. But the end of the process of conquest with the native land of 1913 didn't end there. What happened before that is that there was an imposition of hard taxes. And I think this is important from the discussion that we just had around mention tax and everything. And I want people to hold that particular discussion around hard taxes. That the working class in this country was created through that particular process of saying that if you are unable to pay this hard tax, we will send you to go work in mines. That was the creation of working class in this country. And people are dispossessed of their land. So I'm saying that hold this particular aspect of the hard tax that I was speaking about in this context of land dispossession. But I want us to come to this particular and current context that we're in, Comrade Mars, that we find ourselves in. So currently in this country, we have about 3.7 million people that are on the housing backlog. And we're told that this number is growing at 178,000. And that's a crisis, comrades. It's a crisis that we're in. Majority of our people have been pushed to the peripheries. And it's important that we speak to this context when we're speaking about redistribution. Because we have no land, we're dispossessed. And when we have no land, we're left with nothing but our imagination. And in this imagination, we create very warm homes, Comrade Mars, in Zings. With this imagination, we even attempt a dignified life in townships. And we end up being famous for dying in floods. We end up dying or burning in these things that we call homes. That's a context that we find ourselves in. That's a context that majority of black bodies find themselves in this particular dispensation that we're in. So I'm saying, comrades, that I'm contextualizing this in that particular context because that's where we are. And currently, comrades, there is a housing shortfall that's sitting at 298,000 rands annually between the public sector and the private sector. That's the extent of the crisis that we're in. And this will continue until at least 2028. What does this mean, Comrade Mars? It means that 53% of the houses that will be built in this country will be informal settlements, at least until 2040. That is the context that we find ourselves in. And to live in an informal settlement, to live in a shack, is a continuation of dehumanization of dead bodies. It is not a life of dignity to live in a shack, comrades. And that's something that we should always speak about. And Comrade Maz saying that I'm left with 90 seconds to conclude, and I suspect that will not give me another opportunity to speak. I saw him at the National Dialogue. He's very notorious for doing those things. But comrades, what must then happen? What must then happen? Central to land redistribution, it requires political will. Comrades of legislation, section 25 of the Constitution, speaks to what must happen. And we were speaking about expropriation. the mechanisms that we have, Maqabane. So I'm saying, comrades, as a final analysis in terms of what must happen, because land dispossession created wealth inequality, and this was further, done through properties and accumulation of wealth through property. And I want to say this, Comrade Maz, just bear with me for a second, that there is a perception that is there that property creates wealth. The only property that creates wealth is well-located property. So this fallacious idea that property creates wealth, because a property in Kayelija, the annual rate of return is 4.8% as compared to the 10.5% here in well-located areas. So comrades, I'm situating this to say that land distribution becomes important. And earlier I spoke about the hard taxes. And I'm making a point that mention tax, comrades, should be the means that we use as well as the redistributive mechanism in terms of making sure that we reach equality, comrades. And we've created, Maqabane, we've created and built campaigns because Nifungwas always provide superior logic. We're saying to them that they must redistribute public land through the parking lots. And what the city of Cape Town is doing here, Carl, is here. Carl, every year when they're sitting in council, they're releasing public parcels of land in that city council, Comrade Mas. And I do want to say to a particular extent, that is a classic case of what we call isomorphic mimicry. Because what these comrades are doing every year, they're providing, or they're saying that they're releasing public parcels of land, and rarely there's any building that is happening. There are no bricks that are being built or being put on those public parcels of land. So we're being managed in that particular process, and it can't be. It can't be. What we're saying is that land must be used for its social gain to build housing for people, and not every release of public parcels of land. That's not redistribution if there is nothing that is happening with those public parcels of land. And I hope Comrade Mas that will give us another opportunity.
You get another chance. I wanted you to frame the discussion, and towards the end, you brought quite a powerful piece of experience. Let's come to you, Carl. I would like you to pick up on that point that Mr. concluded with. The release of public parcels of land and the demand for that to be directed to housing, particularly for vulnerable people. Now I want to give you a further twist. In your position in government, I guess you have a range of competing interests. What Kusi is putting forward, but also commercial interests. So looking at that from the perspective of the Constitution, what are the considerations to take into account when you make decisions about the release of such public parcels of land?
No, thanks so much, Mazibuko, and a very good afternoon to everyone present. Let me perhaps start by saying thank you to MU and the collective that is here for arranging this platform. I've always said to Bukhle, I think I was appointed almost 2 years ago, that we might not always agree, but I am going to be the first one to say that there is an important space for NU, Housing Assembly, and such institutions to occupy in the space, not only to hold state actors accountable, but to also guide us into what the ground actually wants to see, because I think we all represent different constituents. So from my side, thanks very much. Look, the reality around land redistribution, particularly in the urban context, is that we can't have this conversation without talking about housing. So when you look at a waiting list of on average 400,000 in the city, you have a demand that is required on 50,000 units per annum, and the city, let's take it with the province and our national counterparts, aren't delivering any more than 5,000 units a year. It's actually much less than that, but on our best year it's at 5,000. That means we aren't even reaching 10% of what Cape Town requires. And so while the current administration in the city appreciates we won't always get it right, when we listen, we need to respond through our lens, but through what we're being advised for. And so that is why before my appointment, the mayor heard the call, I think of many in this room, and said that previous administrations' announcements for the release of land is not enough. You got to put money to it, you got to put administrative mechanisms to it, and you have to put actual political will behind it. And that's what we've done. And I think, Bukle, it's not fair per se. We must give context to this statement of we're just releasing and we're being played like that. Because that's not the reality. The city has done more than just release the land. We've made municipal public land in well-located areas being released the most incentivized in the country. We made it the most attractive. Just on Thursday in the CBD, we awarded a property very close to District 6 at Roland Street, valued at 70 million, and it was released at 10 million, with the intention to develop 335 social housing units. So I think the real question, and where we do find alignment, is when are we going to start seeing cranes in the sky? And that requires a very important question, because the city can't answer that on its own. The reality is that the funding model for human settlement in South Africa does not work. Granted, my national counterparts, and I see the chairperson of the standing committee is undertaking a review on the white paper of human settlements. I think it's a little bit late, but let's accept it. But the point is, what currently National Treasury and others are putting forward to citizens, to Cape Townians, is not enough. And so the answer to seeing more building much quicker is that we need to have a new funding model for affordable and social housing. I think I want to just touch on perhaps where you wanted to direct me. I mean, as much as people have a lot to say about the city and the DA, we've been unambiguous in releasing our city-owned land in the inner city. We're acquiring land in the inner city and the surrounding Woodstock and CBD in order to build affordable housing. The reality is that these are historically exclusive areas that deserve access from communities that if we don't do what we're doing, will never be able to stay here. And I think that while we won't get it right all the time, we're doing a lot more than others around the country. And so in partnership with provincial, national counterparts as well as stakeholders, I think we need to put our minds together about how we accelerate that program in terms of our advocacy and our lobbying. I work very well with the national minister, but the reality is that if every party sitting on the stage serves in parliament, I think 3 of them or 4 of them are in the cabinet, we need to make a commitment that the 668 million rand made available for affordable housing in Woodstock, in the CBD, in Salt River, needs to go directly to metros and not be waiting at a SHRA council or a SHRA governing structure and not being released. And that's ultimately how we're going to make an accelerated approach to affordable housing. Thanks, Mr.
So, Carl, what you've spoken about is within the frame of what works within the law, bylaws, policy. But there are instances where actually homeless people feel that the law does not provide enough. So since COVID, we've seen quite a significant wave of occupations. I visited a community in Fulham who had occupied quite big pieces of land, including the allotments of the actual site being bigger than before, than your typical informal settlement. And the main complaint they were raising was that the city is criminalizing them. The city is not working them to turn the occupation to decent housing. How do you respond to that critique of the people of Fulham?
No, I think that's disingenuous. The reality is, you cannot occupy, and I mean what you're talking about, COVID forms part of the broader drift sands. Was a nature reserve, it got deproclaimed, there's 15,000 structures during the COVID occupations. In the very same Mfuleni, the city is spending more than 500 million rand on access to title service sites for the broader community who have been waiting for such a long time. So I don't think the city is criminalizing. Within the broader drift sands, there is a development framework in partnership with the province. The province is currently undertaking development in COVID, but there are certain places in the city that you just cannot develop. And COVID in Mfuleni is one of them. Not whether it's Carl, whether it's Cameron, whether it's anyone else, houses will not be built there. And so there needs to be an alternative response to the plight of COVID. We are doing that through Bosasa Link, Bosasa Phase 1 and Mfuleni Extension. So I think, you cannot take an isolated space and then frame it and say the city is doing nothing. Of course, the city has a constitutional obligation to provide basic services, which is currently being undertaken by my counterpart within the NACO. But definitely not. The city hasn't criminalized nor neglected them for any one bit.
Thanks, Lal. I'm going to go over to Cameron. Before I do that, what I would like people in the room to do is to fact check what is coming forward. Your fact checking role, please bring it this way. Please send notes to me. My indifferent colleagues will go around the room to collect those so that we can engage. That's proper, that's fair. So Cameron, the ANC at some point had ruled the city of Cape Town. You are now in opposition. A confident member of the mayoral committee putting forward facts and perspectives from this standpoint. In your opposition role, what is your critique of what the city is failing to do when it comes to land and housing?
Thanks very much, Chair. I don't want to make a big issue of it, but the briefing that we had was that we were going to be given 10 minutes to speak. But I do have an input, and I will, it's fine. I will make the input available. But I think for me, the clearest example of how apartheid colonialism has unfairly discriminated against black people in Cape Town and the Western Cape, and when I say black, I mean African, colored and Indian, is just to look at the stats when it comes to ownership of urban land. All of us are aware that the historically white population constitute about 18% of the people of this province, but own 70.7% of urban land. I'm talking about urban land. The stats for agricultural land are even worse. Then you have South Africans who are classified as colored, who constitute over 50% of the population, yet only own 10.7% of urban land. In terms of the African community, who now constitute close to 33%, that figure of ownership of urban land is 3.5%. Now, when the MACO member talks here as a DA councillor, he's also talking on behalf of the DA as a party. Now, the organization that helped to arrange this particular event, one of them, Difulu Ukwazi, I think it's common knowledge that literally a kilometer or two away from here, there was a prime, and there still is in fact, a prime located piece of provincial land that is governed by Giyama, the government removal, compared to municipal land. There's a particular law that governs that. They wanted to give that former special needs school to a single private school. So Mr. Popham mustn't come here and talk about different things that he says the city are doing, whereas in fact the provincial government had a perfect opportunity in terms of Tafelberg, and it's literally after the Difulu Ukwazi court case, and also supported by former Minister of Housing, Lindiwe Sisulu. We still have a situation that there's not social and affordable housing there. Why is that? For me, it's simply a question of failing to address what his own party has signed in the Statement of Intent. The Statement of Intent, and I have a copy of it here, which his party and most other parties here, except for the EFF, have signed, is clear about redress in the Constitution. And Chair, you asked that the organizers are looking at some way in terms of going forward, sort of some kind of a common pledge. I want to suggest that the Constitution itself, with the equality clause, with the property clause, with the expropriation provisions, in fact provides the basis from anyone who's serious about redressing. These figures will not be redressed that I've just read out in terms of a piecemeal approach. Those people that you refer to, convener of the session in Mfuleni, they're living below the floodline. Mr. Popham says there are certain of houses that have been allocated in neighboring areas. But the reality is there's not, first of all, the political will to utilize money for informal settlement upgrades. Here in the city there's a record, and I have that information, of monies that have not been spent or been returned to actually upgrade informal settlements. So you need to make, when people are living below a floodline, you need to say what is the actual alternative, even if it's transitional housing in decent circumstances. So what I would say here is that we're having an incremental approach by the city, but you also have the city being led by a party that has opposed the most fundamental law, which is aimed at redressing the legacy of spatial apartheid, which is the Expropriation Act. The President signed that act on January this year. And for the first time, you have a situation where expropriation is not only for a public purpose, like a road or a school, but in the public interest. So the party that Mr. Popham represents is stand here, and they are actively opposed to the very Expropriation Act, which I'm not saying is a panacea. It's not a panacea, but it will definitely help because it would apply to well-located private land, and then the whole issue of what will be equitable and just, and in which circumstances nil compensation. But that is something that the ANC is committed to. And unless we have that, you talked about the charter going forward. Let's start with the basic document of this country, which is the Constitution, which provides for restitution and expropriation. Our land policy as the ANC is based firstly on the issue of restitution. We can look at some gains made in terms of that act, still unfair. Then security of tenure, and then the pillar, which is, we would all agree, has not moved fast at all, is redistribution. And the Expropriation Act is there. People want to spread stories about land theft, they want to spread white genocide, and all this progressive legislation which an ANC-led government has passed. National health insurance, basic education laws amendment, labor law. Now, because of trade deals with the United States, parties like Mr. Popham's party want us to reverse progressive policy to change our own domestic and foreign policy. We're not going to allow that to happen.
Thanks, Cameron. Carl, I'll give you a chance just later on. I want us to give two more speakers, three, a chance to come in. Brett, you were once in the council and playing a key role on housing and land. And from the process we played, there was quite a good outlook from civil society about how public participation can inform land and housing policy. Going forward, how do we learn from the experience you were part of, but also what are the particular policy proposals from Good on the issues that have been laid out by Carl and Cameron?
Sure. Look, I mean, the access to housing and doing our apartheid city, providing, using public land for public good, in other words, using public land for housing purposes in well-located areas, is such a huge subject, and you've asked me now to narrow it down to this small question, and it can't be answered, I think, in a small way. So if we go back to 2017, 2018, which was the 2-year period when I was the mayoral committee member responsible for housing, at that time, Reclaim the City had just been sort of formed more or less out of the frustration with the provincial government in relation to what happened at the Tafelberg School. And it was a fast learning curve for me around how access to public land in well-located areas was a political choice. It was blocked by previous DA administrations, of which I've been part of, but not really fully conscious of, but blocked because of political choice. Because once I started engaging with the activists and went to the administration and said, we need to use public land that we have discretion over, so we don't need to ask national government for the land or provincial government for the land. Let's start with the land that we as the City of Cape Town have discretion to make a decision on. And the department within weeks, not even weeks, could come up with 11 parcels of land that the City of Cape Town owned in the inner city that was available for housing. And so we were able to release or to announce within weeks that we would release this land for affordable and social housing in the inner city, 11 parcels of land. And we announced that in July. By September 2017, we put out the call for proposals. Now, the question around public participation and stakeholder engagement is an important one, because obviously your first expectation is that there's going to be NIMBYism, not in my backyard, because suddenly you're going to bring poor, mostly black people into well-established, well-located white areas. And what we did was quite simple. We went and engaged with every single stakeholder that we could think of that was registered. The neighborhood watches, the residents associations, the improvement districts. And we shared the plan with every single one of those structures in civil society, in the communities where we wanted to do this project. And ultimately we got the support of every single one of those organizations. And so when we announced and released the parcels of land and had a 3 or 4 day open house in Observatory where people could come and see what were planning to do, there was overwhelming support for that. And it was because people were able to engage with us, ask their questions, and get them addressed. So there was a political will and a step that was taken to release the land. The land was put out on a competitive public process, and it was during that competitive public process that the factions within the Democratic Alliance who were opposed to transformation started pushing back, and ultimately led really to my resignation from the Democratic Alliance and from council. And within 1 month thereafter, those projects were cancelled. Now I've heard recently that Carl Popham has been saying to people it was cancelled because we put all those pieces of land together in one tender, which is completely false. They were issued as separate tenders, and there were 5 pieces of land that were released for by public tender in September 2017, and there were 13 bids that were received by February 2018. So there was public interest, there was market interest in developing mixed-use, shared tenure on these sites, but those proposals were never ever opened, because by the time we left the city, the fights had been going on for months, and they were cancelled by Dan Plato and the administration in December 2019. Let's just go back to land release, because what is happening now is the same parcels of land that we identified in 2017 are being re-released every single few months. I mean, Carl talks about Thursday they released the Rulan Street Fruit and Veg site. It was released by us in September 2017. There were 3 bids on it from the social housing and private sector. It was re-released by Malusi Boyd and the mayor in February 2022 with a ceremony on the site. Now it was released yesterday or Thursday for the 3rd time. I mean,
1 minute to go.
Let's just talk about land release. Tafelberg was studied for affordable housing in 2011. I attended a public meeting 2 weeks ago where we are still talking about applying for the land rights to rezone it by March 2026. 15 years after it was first studied, we are only going to submit the application for the land rezoning in March 2026. I was at the public meeting, I think Bush, you were there too. 15 years and nothing has happened. 2011, Pine Road in Salt River, or Woodstock, if I was elected ward councillor in 2011, the first thing I did after I was elected ward councillor was going to meet the MEC for housing in the province to speak about Pine Road, where 19 families were living in wooden shacks. And we agreed that that land would be transferred to the city and released for social housing. 2011, it is now 2025, the people were moved to temporary housing in 2018. They've been living in temporary housing for 7 years, and Pine Road is not developed. Not a single sign of development in Pine Road. Salt River Market. I resigned from the DA in the city of Cape Town on the site of Salt River Market on the 1st of November 2018 because the DA caucus would not allow us to release that land for mixed use and social housing. It is now 2025. Absolutely nothing has happened there. Newmarket Street was released in 2017, was re-released. It's 8 years, nothing has happened. Pickwick Street, it was released to an organization called Inston or Instituton.
Okay.
Social housing, SOCO, or the National SHRA is saying we're not going to give money to this institution anymore because they're failing in Gauteng. But the land was released in September 2018, September 2017. It is 8 years later, nothing has happened. So what we're getting from the provincial government and the city government is announcements, but absolutely nothing is happening.
Thanks, Brett. I want to come back to you later on the policy proposals going forward. And I'm sure Carl has a lot to say in response. I'll also give you that chance. Before I go to Belgium, I'm keen to get there as a believer. I feel lonely here in front. Without your love. Please pour me your love in a big way. Belgium, the EFF is filing a court application to be a friend of the court to oppose the DA's application to strike down the Expropriation Act. How do you think expropriation could be used in the complexity of the land and housing question in Cape Town?
Thank you,
also, one of the things, the occupations from COVID onwards were a consequence of was a call by the CIC for people to occupy land. After people have occupied land, what role has the EFF actually played to ensure that from the failure of occupation there is now movement forward to decent housing?
Thank you very much indeed. Allow me just to latch on to Brett, just to say each time when they do, the DA do the re-releases, they bring an entourage of media people to take pictures and TV news, make TV news, just to ingrain on the most vulnerable people in their minds to say that we are providing houses for you. That's a false narrative, they are not. Having said that, we are in big trouble in the Western Cape when it comes to the supply of houses. I'm going to answer your question now. But I think we must all be frank and honest today and go and revisit our understanding of our constitutional democracy. Section 26 of the Constitution said that everyone has the right to access to housing. The emphasis is on access to housing and not to a house as such. And then just the next clause says that the state must do everything in their power to realize that objective. Now certainly the state, whether it's the ANC state or the DA state or whatever state, it doesn't matter. They stand accused of breaching the Constitution because millions of people are living in utter squalor. And millions of people, young children, go out of that squalor to school, and it's a generation upon a generation upon a generation. So the time has come where we must try to understand our constitutional obligation towards our community and whether we are satisfied with the Constitution in its current state. It brings me to the question that you've asked. The expropriation without compensation, and it's a fair comment. It's a vital comment that's much needed. It has become critical. We must expropriate land, not just land that's not in use by the state, but land that's been stolen. Not only to 1930, but way back to the 17th century, even when Jan van Riebeeck came here, and he dispossessed people. So, the ANC government has not done enough to address those issues on behalf of the communities. And I say this respectfully, Comrade Cameron. I think we must do much more enough in order to respect the constitutional rights of our citizens, and we must also ask in a DA province, do we look at black people only as criminals? Do we criminalize them and they are good enough to stay in squatter camps, and we keep them far away from the affluent areas? Now come and tell you, comrade, what the DA does is that they use something what they call the urban edge. And it's in law. They refuse to change, to amend the urban edge, meaning that they keep poor people outside the urban edge. If you come to George, you will see the affluent people are staying in the wilderness, in Harold's Bay, in Victoria Bay, and all over. And everybody else is pressed into a very small space within the city. And therefore you have thousands of people in squatter camps. So the DA is reluctant to lift the urban edge so that poor people, and not only poor people for that matter, citizens of South Africa, whether they have money or not, live in spaces where they are actually entitled to live. the DA doesn't want them because they protect the interest of the rich and the affluent. And we are not generalizing here when it comes to white people. White people have rights in this country, they have constitutional rights, we must understand it. But we cannot be in support of a party that protects only the rights of the affluent, those that are wealthy and those that are rich, and we leave the vulnerable, the poor and the marginalized behind. I forgot your last question from the medication. Yes, this is why we say, all over in our constitutional, in our election manifestos and so on, you've heard earlier on from the previous panel, the processes that they explain here to the general public, 30 some odd years after we are in democracy, are laborious, drawn out, long processes that must go from this minister and that deputy minister and that DG and so on, and it never reaches the people. So what we say is, we need radical legislative reform to compel the state, after it has been, that land has been occupied, that those people demand rights, zonal rights, constitutional rights, and every other right, and that right should be financed to give them access to housing. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Jasmine, I will give you some kind of freedom together with Francesca to comment on what has come through, giving us your perspective as a Patriotic Alliance. One specific question though, what is the DA's approach to undoing the racialized geography of apartheid in the city of Cape Town?
Yeah, thank you very much, Program Director. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity and thank you for NU for championing this particular discussion. The Patriotic Alliance is very, we are clear in our position within the city of Cape Town. The city's current narrative that they want to push, that they are a caring city, is not true. They are caring for a select within the city. And so that is a fact. We have seen the increase of informal settlements within the city alone, and we can perhaps look at the province as well. But due to COVID and a whole host of other things. But by and large, the reason for that, both in our black townships and our colored communities, the homes that was built almost 100 years ago is not suffice for our people. And if you look at our black communities, if you look at colored communities, the same thing is happening. The size of the homes are so small that our families expand and thus need to, I almost want to say, establish informal settlements. And that's a fact. You cannot live in a home that is a two space, literally a kitchen and a bedroom. And of course the DA run, City of Cape Town will try to distort that, but there's evidence to that effect. When I did my research, I saw that the national average for a home in this country is 162 square meters, sorry. And that was only between 2015 to 2017. In the city of Cape Town, that average is way less. The city wants to come and grandstand that they are building homes, but the homes are so small. Yeah. It is even smaller than the ones built almost 70 or 100 years ago. If you look at the quality of the homes that the city is building, it's pathetic. Houses are too small. The quality of these homes are in a state. But another thing we need to look at, what the city is trying to grandstand here, is the fact that they are building 3,000 to 5,000 homes per year. And so that total itself must be investigated. I don't trust anything in blue. But that said, the Patriotic Alliance can publicly say that we are busy with a draft to the National Department. And we are asking for a review of the quality of the homes, but also the sizes of these homes. Yes. Being cognizant of the fact that our families are simply too big. We cannot have the current average 41 square meter homes in our communities. Another thing I want to touch on before I hand over to my colleague on the left is basic services. City of Cape Town wants to indicate that they cannot provide basic services to people on private property, but they are selective on what private property they want to provide services to. Classic case would be where people are not even receiving the basic 3 services, which is electricity, water, sanitation. They simply don't want to provide it. They can provide it, they don't want to provide it. There's a big difference between the two. And so as a Patriotic Alliance, we are going to challenge that particular review of policy as well, so that our people in blue cannot every time use that excuse that we cannot provide services on private property. The need is dire, and if I look in my ward, I'm a ward councillor in the city of Cape Town. We took that ward like candy from the people in blue, but that's it. We are now empowered within that ward. And now the people that we've inherited from the people in blue still don't have services. 18th Avenue, a parcel of land called Wingfield, owned by Indabini Class. Yes, you right away, it's private property. But the city of Cape Town has a legislative responsibility towards those people. They've come and installed a standpipe. That is what they were willing to install, but they were not willing to install sanitation services nor electricity. And so we need to debate the willingness of the Democratic Alliance municipality. Why are we choosing when to give services and how to give services and where to give services? And I hope that the MACO member will be able to be man enough to explain and also indicate how they are willing to meet the need of people like that, even though they are on private property. Thank you.
It has been a voice choir, and RISE is not in the city of Cape Town. Well, I'm wrong. I call Lily, I forget, I call Lily, wherever you are. Sorry. Hello. The player was known. Okay, Francesca, what is your take on the issues that have come up, but also similar to the question to Jasmine, the policy proposals from RISE?
So first off, I just want to say is we might not be in government. I myself am also not a politician, probably like you because I have a tendency to fall off stages. And we might not be in government, the cake's on yet, but watch this space. First off, I want to say that I think the biggest barrier to land reform, especially in our urban areas, but also just countrywide, is that we tend to see this as a historical dispossession issue, particularly in rural areas. And I do want to quickly pause there, because even though that's not necessarily this discussion, I do think it's important to acknowledge the massive historical backlog that we have in land claims. I think the initial due date for submitting land claims was in 1998. For context, I was born in 1998, that's 27 years ago. And at the current rates and the current budget allocation, it would take another 30 years to resolve the remaining 5,000 claims, which is absolutely unacceptable. But to come back to the urban issue, I think, like I said, I think the biggest barrier to land reform is not laws, it's not regulations, it's not the constitution, it's the way that we think about it. So we tend to think about it as a historical issue, but actually it's about what the city, what this country looks like now, and what we want it to look like in the future. Specifically, demand and land, a need for land is growing exponentially in urban areas. I think we all know and agree that it's much higher in urban areas than it is in rural areas at the moment. But still, governments and a lot of political parties still like to bury their head in the sand and pretend that it's not an issue in cities and that it's not an issue here in particular. Ultimately, land reform and land redistribution, as I think was touched on in the previous panel excellently, is ultimately a spatial planning and development issue. It needs to be baked into those processes. And for that very reason, I think, as my colleagues have alluded here, is we cannot have these protracted spatial reform processes in municipalities or in provinces, etc. It needs to be expedited. Land reform should be baked in there, and it should be a priority. Part of that is we cannot do justice to our spatial sort of setup at the moment if we do not expropriate land. I think as as colleagues have mentioned, we have the Expropriation Act and it urgently needs to be implemented. Population growth, urbanization, climate change, these are all factors that play a role in our current situation, but will play even more of a role going into the future. We need to expropriate land as government, or the people will expropriate it. And ultimately the question is, will government continue to criminalize occupations, or will they take into account that these population growth, these population changes is inevitable, it will happen. People need housing, they need communities. Will we expropriate that land to make sure that that is a legal reality, instead of just criminalizing the people who need it the most? So yeah, this is absolutely essential to unlocking spatial justice, especially in urban areas. Part of it is also to have meaningful public participation in those processes. Government cannot assume what communities and people need, but they should also not allow civic organizations, as have been mentioned before, to trample the need for spatial justice and to bring into effect those changes that we need. We can have announcements and we can have policies and we can have laws, and it doesn't really matter who necessarily brought them into place if they are not being implemented. They need to be implemented. Two last issues that I do want to touch on, which I think is affecting just the existing housing stock that we have. We have an urgent need for more housing, but we have two big issues that's affecting even the existing housing that we have, particularly in the city. Number one is short-term rentals, or Airbnbs. At this point, locals are being priced out of their own homes. They're being priced out of their own communities by this growth and effectively the elites. Even people not even based in South Africa buying up properties for the sole reason of renting them out of short rentals. We need to urgently change laws and regulations, and this is one part where those legal type of things can be very important. We need to change those to make sure that our current housing is not being monopolized by the elites. Our locals need to have access to that. And I think, once again, we can have all of these laws and regulations which we urgently need to address this issue. It's a new issue. It's only in recent years that it's really come about. We've seen how it plays out around the world. We know what we need to safeguard ourselves against. But we need the political will. And here I hope my colleagues who are in government can also speak to the fact that we need political will to address this. At the same time, I want to address the issue of social housing. So social housing, I think, is often lauded as the solution to our housing shortages, which, yes, we do have a need for it. It has an important role to play. But I think we honestly need to rethink how we are addressing this public housing regime as a total. At this point, and I think Kashifa might have mentioned this before, the conditions in social housing developments are sometimes horrific. The rules that people are being subjected to, the rates that they are being subjected to, it's undignified. I cannot see how anybody can look at that type of situation and think, yes, this is a good solution to help people that are already vulnerable. But when you have a situation where you challenge the municipality, and I will give credit here, I know they've been challenged and they've addressed some of the rates issues. But when you challenge them on some of the other conditions, the role that security plays at these developments, the role that these rules play in forcing them into an undignified life, municipalities said that's not their problem. It's the social housing institution itself that should be addressing that. Then you go to the province. Province refers to the Rental Housing Tribunal. The Rental Housing Tribunal tells you that they don't take group cases, they do not address systemic issues, they only take individual cases. Now I ask you, when you're dealing with systemic issues, where are you then supposed to go? Your last resort, you go to SHRA. We've heard about SHRA for a lot now, but SHRA, this national government institution, they say they only step in cases of maladministration. Now I ask you, first up, let's talk about the definition of maladministration, we can unpack that, but isn't the fact that you have the social housing institution that is forcing people an undignified life not the very definition of what they should be stepping into? They are the regulator, they should be stepping in. So ultimately, I think what social housing does and why we need to rethink it, because there is a need for it, but we need to rethink about how we are approaching it, is we are effectively leaving already vulnerable groups to the walls that some social housing institutions have turned into, with no safeguards, with no barriers to make sure that they are protected. And I'm sorry, but government cannot simply outsource their housing responsibilities to the private sector without the necessary guardrails to do the things that they're responsible for. Thank you.
My gentle pressure works. Thanks to the political parties, on average each speaker took about 7 minutes. I gave more time to Carl because there were specific questions at the party in government. So what I'm about to do is going to sound unfair because there were lots of things pointed his way, which I think is only fair to give him 3 minutes to sum up in response, but we'll still come back to everyone else quickly. Yeah, not now. I want to, after Carl, I want to go to the audience, then we'll come back. According to what I have, it should be up until 13:40, 13:45 before we can break.
No, thanks, Mr. Buka. I'll be quick. You know, friends, we've probably been on the stage now for 45 minutes, maybe almost an hour. And bar the inputs made by Francesca, there's just been a pissing context. That's all that's happened here. You are not going to tell me that one part of this conversation actually offered a tangible solution to the problems we're facing. Yes, no, it's fine. Bash the city, bash the DA, we'll all leave here. The scene situation will leave here, and nothing actually that needs to be solved has been addressed. I, at the end of the day, can also make comments about how Cameron and his party has bust up District 6. Nothing has come of it all these years later. No attempt at probably what would be the biggest, not only restitution, but affordable housing initiative for Cape Town. I can talk about the fact that yes, and absolutely, Brett cares about affordable housing in the inner city, redressing apartheid spatial planning, but he must just be honest and say, announcements were just that, announcements. There was no technical work done to actually get what we are doing done. So talk about re-releasing and releasing, it's fine. No de-risking of land parcels, no understanding of how to release it through actual law in the MATR, none of that was done. It was never going to happen. I'm not saying he didn't try, but I'm not going to pretend like anything was actually going to get done. So this is what I actually want to say, colleagues. Currently the city has 7 land parcels that haven't just been released, have been awarded. In excess of 5,000 social and affordable housing units can be developed tomorrow, next week. Relax, Roscoe, relax. Simply what must happen. The Shra Council, which is an entity of the national government under Minister Simelane, needs to approve the applications for funding to build the social housing. Colleagues, it doesn't help bashing the city when we aren't holding other spheres of government accountable. You must clap us when we aren't getting it right. I'll be the first one to say it. Maybe it's the benefit of having a younger member of the mayoral committee. But at the end of the day, when we have access to opportunity that is not funded and current national legislation doesn't actually accelerate, where is the accountability? We have our colleagues talking about the size of houses, the quality of houses, the qualification threshold. I agree. We've got the chairperson of the standing committee at the back. Let's take a commitment today that we're going to review the grant funding framework. We're going to review through the white paper review that 3,500 rand is just not practical for a qualification threshold to a low-cost house. Let's take those resolutions here and channel it through the correct leadership, through the correct structures, and then we can actually say that out of this panel, outside of bashing each other and having a pissing context, we actually are able to take practical solutions. That's what I'm saying, Mr. Boko. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. So up until this comment from Carl, my concern was how do we move to a point where the organizers of the gathering are saying policymakers take us forward through a common charter. I think elements of that have sort of emerged, but I'm keen that we tilt the balance in that direction furthermore. I'll come back to the parties. I'm now giving a chance to the audience, but here there's a believer as quickly. Is giving people 32 square meters of space development. That's the first question. We need a fact sheet on the state of homelessness, tenure and security in the city of Cape Town and the Western Cape because of the DA's cold-hearted and undisguised make-believe of releasing land that they've already released along the lines referred to by Brett. This will help in driving policy that is evidence-based. History in our context cannot and must not be ignored. We must recognize injustices of the past, aims and visions of the past. Is it under the Constitution of Human Rights to stay almost 9 years without basic services, such as water, sanitation, and electrification? You provide chemical toilets. What are people going to deliver on those toilets without water and electrification? I'm talking about Kandu. Secondly, the ANC and the DA must stop playing political dynamics as in Kaibija. It is the ANC that is dominating in some cases, and they play political dynamics. Basic services are not about your political parties. It is for South African citizens. Your political dynamics make many people to suffer. And then there's one on WhatsApp. Questions. Oh, Carl said this land has been released for social housing, but this item from the council meeting on Thursday shows that they are moving away from social housing to affordable housing or mixed development. If you read further in the item of the council agenda. So he lied. The city also doesn't have an affordable and inclusionary housing policy to guide how development should be done by the private sector. Okay. As we take hands, on the screen are the outcomes of the poll we did this morning when we came in. I need assistance with moving the microphone. I see the Bailey Family Foundation here. I see Akolile. I see the MK Party. I'm not yet, I'm just noting the hands. Behind the MK Party, a member of parliament, and so colleagues, those are the hands. I've seen two more here. Let us start then with Umama from the Bailey Family Foundation.
Afternoon. I'm Kumeza. From Fuleni. I need to come to look at my face because I'm from that area.
What I forgot to say, all speakers on the floor, please keep it to 2 minutes. I've got my powerful tool to keep it to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Carl, this one is based straight to you. You said in Fuleni, COVID, there's nothing that is going to happen. Bear in mind, you've got 2 years on that chain. What do you know? Nothing. All right? We can't have nothing at Fuleni. We've been doing emails to your cabinet, to mayor, to everyone, going with NU. You're telling us nothing that you can get. But there are areas who has some services while they also flooding. I'm from that area that is flooding. You and ULJG now, you've opened a project that we started fighting from 2020. That is only released in last year. It's not even done by this year. Imagine from family of 10 in the house, move to the 4x4 square meter, 32 square meters in a yard. But you there, stay with your own family for driving nice cars, eating whatever you want to feel like eating today. You've got dogs. You know when you do your washing, you can hang around your house. But where you're moving us, no space to do our washing. No space to, I'm talking this to you, you know we were there in Fuleni, and I'm coming to that Bosasaling you're talking about. You're taking people from Philippi. You're relocating black people to the black areas instead of taking black people to a township. We also want our kids to go in a township, to take the schools in town. Our families are working hard from location to in town, to waterfront. We face very bad treating that you guys are giving us. And now you're telling us that there's a project that is happening. You were in Fuleni. How much did you sow in Fuleni? You were in Fuleni last week. Tell me, how did you see that Bosasaling happening there? Are you certified? But the people who stay in Fuleni were not certified. What I'm trying to tell you, we need a services in COVID. Here in South Africa, there's a temporary service. Whether you're relocating people to somewhere, there is a temporary service. And also there is an emergency budget that you're doing every year. 2024, 2025, 2025, 2026, there's a budget that is happening. Where is the development for informal settlement? Don't tell me about what you're doing there now.
Let's hold it there. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Jackie and I live in Boerkaap. So we know Boerkaap is a really well located area. But what you don't maybe know is that our people historically are working class people. And even though we live in million-rand homes, we are quite poor. Unemployment side, we have the same social issues everybody else has. But we don't actually get any of those services. So my comment is directed obviously at the city in regards to land and housing. Now we were fortunate enough, a couple of years ago, we worked with DAG in doing an enumeration survey that the purpose of which was to find out what kind of housing do people need in Boerkaap. And the other thing they did was identify land in Boerkaap where we can build these housing. Now, we were told that the city has no plans at all to release that land for housing. So, we've done the work. The city didn't do it. Together with NGOs, we've done the work, we've done the survey. We know how many people need housing, we know what kind of housing they need, we know what they qualify for. And we identified the housing, land. So why can that land not be released? Why can it not be a community trust? The Constitution allows for that. There's an act that allows for community land trust. And where we identify what that land is used for. And this land that we identified is owned by the city, so they can make that decision. We don't have to wait for anybody else. Currently, just the last thing on the land as well, we have this Transnet Quarry development currently, which the city is marking for mixed use. But the people of Boerkaap, that land was always recreational space. But we are now told that the land that is for recreational space, which we don't have any, must be financially viable, which is why they're making it mixed use. Why is it our responsibility to pay for our own recreational space?
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Malik Santana with the People's Empowerment Collective. So I'll just begin by saying that Audre Lorde said that we will never dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. And I want us to contemplate the discussion that's going around here about the social issues. So there's been discussion of solutions. I think that was quite an unfair comment because there was mention of the need to regulate the operation of social housing corporations. But besides that, I think we have to look at the Land Expropriation Act. It's been discussed sort of as some sort of progressive piece of legislation, but one of the requirements for this to actually happen, the no compensation, is that the land has to be abandoned by its owner. If we contemplate why would an owner abandon valuable land, essentially this is just, again, an example of isoformic mimicry. So I do want to make an appeal that we see some sort of imagination around the true solutions, because clearly we're still moving on a path of reformism towards incremental gains that pacify our people, black people. Ultimately, this is a call to the activist researchers in this space, because we know that the people in front of us are not necessarily always acting in our interests. I seek my time.
Good afternoon. My name is Saira Abada. I'm a member of Parliament serving in the National Assembly on behalf of the Umkhonto we Party. Firstly, to the organizers, I'm very disappointed that Ingrid is not on the panel, but I know there is the next time and I will get that opportunity. To the ruling of the provincial government here. Number one, let's just start taking accountability. Yes, I agree with you that everybody's pointing fingers, but take accountability. Number one, accountability. Okay. Secondly, I'm shooting because I'm angry, and my committee will tell you, because I sit on the Human Settlements Committee, they will tell you, when it comes to dignity and humanity, it's very close to my heart, and I fight for our people. And when I say our people, I mean everybody. White people included, because there are some people that are going through this as well. So what I ask is, can our people have dignity? It's not something that needs to be bought. It's not something that needs to be given. We deserve it. We deserve humanity. We deserve dignity. Secondly, can we all work together to get this done? Okay? Pointing fingers is not going to change anything, but you say that Cape Town is the best run city in the world, or South Africa. It's a joke. Because let me tell you something, when you come, tourists coming over on the plane, what do they see first? What do you see first? Okay? So come, let's take the accountability here. Let's help the people. You know, recently the DA came to our Human Settlements Department or committee and asked us to help send, help to do a bill, to adopt a bill. The bill is to get rid of the, sorry, I'm angry. the High Act, yes, they want to change the act, right? And they want to say that if the land invaders, they want to charge the land invaders 2 million rands. Now tell me, if every one of you here had 2 million rand, would you invade land? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Make that make sense, please. Then if you don't have 2 million, because a lot of us don't have 2 million rands just lying around, they're going to throw you in jail for 5 years. So please, please explain to me, how does this make sense? But again, just, you know, stop putting our people in shacks, stop sending them to TRAs for 15, 20 years, because we've seen that. Thank you.
My name is Sulan Kamed, a member of parliament from the Portfolio Committee of Human Settlement. Yes, indeed, I'm deployed by Umkondos of the party. I know and I understand that this thing, there is also a party there, yeah, fortunately enough, a former ruling party. They strongly believe, or there is what every one of us, when we go to elections, when we want to be applauded, we will mention radical economic transformation and also mention what you call the expropriation without of land without compensation. And we really mean it, and we are not apologetic about it as Umkodo as a party. You must know that we want expropriation of land without compensation. The land, if we talk about the land distribution, it faces two major hurdles: politics and society. And the political side is often lack of government will and a measured approach, while the society or the social side involve deep-seated power imbalances and clashing viewpoint. My question would be, how can the land redistribution be done to correct old wrongs without creating new problems like social inequality or people becoming too dependent on the government? I'm asking this question simply because I'm asking, in as much as I'm asking to the panel, I'm also asking ourselves. Because the problem that we have, for this to really work, we really need the people. When we get land, we're not going to just give our people land without the involvement. We need to support them, include access to money, trainings on farming, because you may get the land, but you don't know how to farm, and also ways to sell what they produced. Because at the end of the day, we don't want to take our people, give them land without even training them, because that might result into more failure and more stress. So in actual fact, we really need to work together. So my question to you, is there a plan, and whatever that we have gathered here to do is to make sure that we don't only expropriate land, but give the land back to our people, but give also solutions so that we can move our country forward smoothly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Akoli Renikwala, and I'm a PR councillor with the City of Cape Town, in the City of Cape Town with the Good Party. Firstly, I'd like to speak to the politicians in the media. Let's disabuse ourselves of saying City of Cape Town is the best run city. There might be a better run city in South Africa, but there's no best run city in South Africa. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. Secondly, and to the MPs as well, people don't invade land. Land was invaded in 1652. People occupy land. In our legislation, there's no language that says invaders or illegal occupation. You won't see something like that. It's an unlawful occupation, not an illegal occupation. This is important for the media and the politicians because they spread this language that is violent and criminalizes people. I just came from a meeting in Goodwood, DCI. Carl will know because I've been engaging with him on this. The things that Francesca was talking about, the rules, the unconstitutional rules of these facilities, including transitional housing in Pickwick, there in Salt River. We just heard again today that an elderly man died because he was locked out of DCI because of the visitation rules. So social housing is meant to undo the legacy of apartheid and bring people back closer to the CBD. But now these social housing facilities, and I'm glad the MPs are here because I've been wanting to engage with them. Because SHRA runs away from accountability. The city runs away from accountability. The province runs away from accountability. Now we need the MPs. Someone has died because they were locked out of a social housing facility. We need the Portfolio Committee of Human Settlements to investigate this. In Konradi Park, someone died there as well. People are dying. And so the situation is terrible. What we are seeing as a closure, as I was saying, social housing was meant to bring back people. But what is happening now, we see a breakdown of families, black and colored families, because family members are not allowed to visit their relatives. They're not allowed to sleep with their relatives in these facilities. And so we are doing this apartheid again. And Carl, you have to take responsibility with human settlements in the city of Cape Town. We can no longer run away from this while people are dying. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Linda, and I'm a member of RTC. It came in the city. I'm an occupier not far from here. We've been occupying the building for 8 years here in Cape Town, just a road over to Waterfront. We've been living there as South Africans. We got no water, we got no electricity for 8 years. We've been staying there. The city criminalizes us as criminals. They call us criminals. They don't see us as South Africans. It's so sad to learn today. I'm very sad. I'm standing also on behalf of domestic workers from Sea Point. We occupy that place because there's nothing for domestic workers in Cape Town. There's nothing at all. People have been staying there. Nobody takes note of them. Nobody see that they are citizens of South Africans. And people told us past that building of us, seeing us as criminals and wondering, and we are a show. We are not like decent citizens of this country. They are looking at us as we are a show, because how can people live in a building like this? The building has been vandalized because the city don't take responsibility for their buildings. The city leave the building to be ruined by criminals. People are in and out of that building. We live there as women, as humans, as women who got children. Our children are being used by people who use drugs and things, because there's no care for us. There's no care for us in that building. People don't care about us. There's security at our gates who don't care about the people. They have more care about the building, but they don't even care who ruined the building. Please take note of us. We are citizens of South Africa, and we love our country. We don't have any other country to go to like other people. This is the only place we know is South Africa.
Okay, so in a democratic world,
bless you, my sister. Colleagues, I know there's a lot of it. I know there's a lot of frustrations. For us to hear each other, we have to talk properly and procedurally. If we all talk at the same time, we won't hear each other. And what I'm appealing for is that we respect time. The political parties are not necessarily all part of the participants in the room. People have commitments that they have made for other things. So, I've seen two hands after the last hands. You, my sister, and you. And now you see, this is the problem. This is exactly the problem. If I allow one, there will be a scene. And obviously then that doesn't help anyone. So please, colleagues, please. I will allow the three of you, but I'll be very strict with 1 minute. No preambles, just to the point. What's the question?
Thank you very much. In a democratic world, we have been living for over 30 years now in democracy. And yet you come and claim that you are giving people dignified housing. That's not true. Speaking of Mfuleni as a whole, you spoke about Sasalini. You spoke about phase 1 and phase 2, but at the very same time, that's not for the people of Mfuleni. Now we're going to speak about drift sand. You say you have a plan for drift sand. You are giving people 32 square meter land with a 4x4 shack, and there are people and families that have about 6 to 8 people there. At the very same time, the space between the shacks is a meter only. Do you call that dignified housing? Do you call that you are giving people? What happens next? This is the very same thing that is actually making us to become the working class of South Africa, because at the very same time, where you're sending people in drift sand, there is no services, even though you're saying it's in the pipeline, and at the very same time, it is very unsafe for the people. One thing I would like to say to DA is that please make sure that the dignity of people comes first, not money.
Evening, everybody. I actually have a solution for you. Last year, some group of communities went to Ellen Windy. We gave him a book for 4 sites in Cape Town, right here, that the parking lot. I'm happy that you know about it. Go look at that book again. It gives you all the social housing that can be developed on those sites. And all these people's problems can actually be solved by those 4 sites. So I think we should go back and look at that book and then come back to us. Because the last time I spoke to Ellen Windy, he told us about D66. And it seems like already D66 is a problem and he doesn't have a solution for it. And we have solutions for him. We did the work for him. He just needs to go back and look at that book.
Translate again. Ngo-2020, nge-20 kaJuni, sathatha umhlaba kuthiwa ka-AXA. Andazi bayingubo bethu nathini namhlanje. Kodwa kuthiwa ka-AXA. Umbuzo omunye ukuthi kutheni kunzima kangaka ukunika abantu befana babayandila zona. Amanzi. Uye mhlawumbe ukuthi hey ngaye ngingathenga namsebenzi. Abekhala abahamba ekade sithi yini bathekisela Mandela xa besihla ithorisi zihlapha phansi ahlala iveki phansi umzasurvive kangakanani na yena. Number 2, number 2, your politicizer is today is the best run country. Ungabona phaya for e-sports complex, a sports complex of Badinga. We look at ANC. That's how the budget is structured. Now, all around, ubanibonakalisa amabala awenzayo kwezindawo. Edelphi lasinaga itenge ikhoyo phambilanda. Abantwana behlobo bahlala ngathi ibala for about 8 years. Alo uyangena kanti. Cela la mbuzo bathi kutheni kunzima unika abantu amanzi ne toilet. We say dignified toilet by ngamaphili.
During 2020, they occupied land. Why was it called Axel land? Why is it not theirs? Why is it difficult for the DA to actually give? Why is it difficult actually for the DA to give people basic services, water and sanitation, and invite to Carl to go and join the community agreement, the land promise settlement just for a week to see if he can actually survive those conditions? That's the summary. We've got a tough job now. I will say you will be the last speaker to wrap it up and pose that question from where we are. How do we move forward towards an agreement upon the various role players? Clearly, political parties can tend to be entrenched in their policy positions and their critiques. There's a lot of anger and frustration from people who need land and housing, as has come through from all the comments. How do we move from these entrenched positions to a new dispensation where we can engage meaningfully in a way that transforms? I'll start with Francesca. I will give it about 3 to 4 minutes per speaker, all the way. But then you have the last one.
Let's see if I can keep it short. So I think I try to come here with solutions as well, and I think listening to you, I've added to that. So I have 6 broad solutions that I think I want to put on the table. Number 1, we need to rethink and redo spatial planning. We cannot do this piecemeal approach towards just addressing as soon as this community has an issue, okay, now we'll go in and help them. No. We know where Cape Town's going to be in 30 years. If we don't, then we need to research that. We need to work with academics, etc. Know where Cape Town is going in 30 years. Plan for that. Plan for what communities, all communities will need. And that also needs to be a situation where we bring in communities, bring in all other stakeholders together to collaboratively create and curate this future and to build it then. Number 2, let's protect our homes and let's protect our communities from the exponential growth of short-term rentals. We urgently need, as I mentioned, regulations and laws and implementation of those things to protect homes from this, and to also safeguard local ownership. You shouldn't be priced out of your own home. Number 3, let's ensure that our public housing is dignified. That's a point that's been raised a lot. I've mentioned specifically social housing. Other points of other public housing initiatives have been mentioned. Let's ensure that those solutions are dignified, that they recognize our shared humanity. It's not just people to go and put away somewhere. These are also people that need homes, just as every one of us. And that's the way that government should be approaching public housing. Number 4, let's stop criminalizing being poor. I mean, we've spoken about occupations that shouldn't be criminalized, but the same principle goes towards being homeless. Why does bylaws and things criminalize begging? Why does it criminalize being in certain spaces? Why does the focus on security and law enforcement pretty much ineffectively criminalize people? We need to rethink our bylaws, we need to rethink the government's approach to law enforcement, and unfortunately I have to specifically say that's the thing in Cape Town as well. The situation where law enforcement is prioritized over people's lives, that's not acceptable. Number 5, let's empower people with knowledge. That goes part of the public participation. People need to know their rights. Something that we've also seen in social housing is where people don't even realize what's happening to them constitutes an eviction. And there are processes that evictions must follow, but because you don't even know what's happening to you constitutes an eviction, you don't even know to say, but listen, this is not right. And yes, we also need to make sure people have access to things to enforce that, but people barely even know what they are empowered to do and what rights they have. We also need to make sure that people know who's responsible for what. That's something that we kind of have to also give over to civil society to do these things, but government has a tendency to say, but this is not my problem, province should do that. Province says that no, but this institution should do that. That institution says that person should do it. And in the end, you run from one part to the other just to get access to a house or access to basic protection. That is unacceptable. Government should make clear who should be doing what. There shouldn't be this option for just relegating your responsibility to someone else. But people, us, you should also know exactly who's responsible and keep them to it. Because the situation where you're also being given the run of the mill, you don't even know who's responsible, is also unacceptable. And the third part of that, which links to my last part, is that people should know what the budget process is. I know that's reached a lot of public awareness with all the drama in the National Assembly, but it's just as applicable in municipal budgets, and we've seen that with all the recent debates on rates. But we the public, and I do count myself here in because I'm also a resident of Cape Town, we often only hear about these things by the time that the budget is almost finalized. And then there's this checkbox exercise of, oh, but send in your public comments. No, we need to know exactly when the budget is being formulated and how we can give our inputs there already. And that links to my last part, which I promise I will rush off, is that budget is a big issue. Government doesn't have money for everything. Unfortunately, it's true, we've seen it, we've heard of municipal financial distress, it's a big issue. However, in the limited budget that there is, choices are being made. Certain things are being prioritized over other things. And we often do see that things like law enforcement is being prioritized over people's lives. And that's something that government should be doing, to make sure that people know how to give their inputs, but also to, at the get-go, ensure that the priority is people's lives, is the social development, is the protection of vulnerable groups, not just the protection of the elite. Thank you, and my apologies.
Thank you very much. And to link on what Francesca said, I think it's important that that imagination of a new dispensation must become a reality. And when it becomes a reality, when we start to propose legislation, whether bylaws, policies, white papers, whatever you want to call it, and it needs to be supported by everybody. And as you know, in the state of Cape Town, the DA is the majority. But nonetheless, in the spirit of restoring people's dignity, I can tell you now that our caucus, the Patriotic Alliance, will with other opposition parties as well, propose the affordable housing policy very, very soon. And of course, we will engage yourselves as activists and researchers, because you guys rest with the knowledge and the information. So I think that's important one to say. The second thing we need to talk about is the fact that social housing rates are unaffordable, and therefore people like DCI, and I want to thank the good political party for their championing of that particular matter. Brett, you guys can really honor yourself for that sterling piece of work in Goodwood. The other thing we are going to do is to also perhaps look at land that has been given for restitution but not used at all. And so it is just lying there dormant. Perhaps we need to relook at the use of that land, especially in cases where land has been redistributed but not being developed. So I think that would be one of the other things that we need to look at. Perhaps the Mako member would be able to speak more to this. The Wingfield refugee tent racked up a bill of about 7 million, almost 8 million rand in irregular expenditure for services to the refugees in that tent. But a few meters down 18th Avenue, they don't want to give services to South Africans. And so when we look at the disparity of who gets and who don't get, in the light of we are a caring city, that leaves much to be desired for. The last thing I want to also make mention is the solution to the 4 sites, the parking lot map. That will be taken up by our provincial leadership within the Western Cape legislature again. And of course, force the Premier to act on it, because the Premier is very good. In fact, the DA is very good on social media. But in reality, of course, it leaves much to be desired. So that's the solutions we are putting on the table as the Patriotic Alliance. And of course, we can be held accountable for that. We'll get back to you. We'll speak to NU and engage everyone here present today. Thank you.
Thank you, comrades. I think there's a universal rule that states that before you get to the solution, you must do diagnostics. Just to our dear colleague, accusing us of pushing here. Now, let us give you practical solutions that we've been preached for so long. And this is what we propose. First and foremost, we will be highly opposed to the establishment of another Seapoint, another Clifton, and all those affluent areas. Therefore, we will introduce, as the EFF, we will introduce restrictions to foreign land ownership. also land use rights. Because these guys come in here with their foreign currency and they buy huge amounts of lands, pieces of lands, and the poor and the ordinary citizens of Africa don't qualify. Targeting specifically the holding of land by multinationals and billionaires, we propose that we will introduce limitations in terms of the size of land individuals can own and have rights to. This will be determined by a solid study of ecological limits of the various districts in the country. The EFF will propose that we will fast track the distribution of land through the land redistribution program and transfer 50% of the land to black people within the first 5 years in government. And we will do this unapologetically. The EFF government takes cognizance of the difficulties caused by the land restitution program and will do away with land restitution as a mechanism for land reform and have the land reform program anchored mainly by land redistribution instead of restitution. And these are vital interventions. The EFF government will address urban land poverty by releasing state land and abandoned buildings for housing purposes. 2 more points, sir. The EFF further proposed that we will establish a people's land court in each of the provincial divisions of the High Court to have exclusive jurisdiction to handle all land-related disputes. The EFF further proposed that we will establish a land ombudsman who will have powers similar to a Chapter 9 institution mandated to investigate and make rulings on land disputes between people and the state. Lastly, sir, the EFF will provide pre-settlement planning and post-settlement support to each person or community allocated land use rights to ensure that the land allocated is fully utilized for its intended purposes, and women and youth will be afforded land for agriculture. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, let me, I hope I can do this in 3 or 4 minutes. I think the starting point is the legislation that governs all of what we're talking about is enabling legislation, not blocking legislation. So the Housing Act, the SPLUMA, Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act, the Constitution of South Africa, the Social Housing Act, the Municipal Asset Transfer Regulations, the Municipal Finance Management Act, that's all enabling legislation. So let us not become bureaucratic and use legislation as an excuse to delay the release of public land for public good or for public housing for 10 years, 15 years, because we need to so-called do a transactional study and a feasibility study and a de-risking study that takes years and years and years. Because let me tell you, if you go to the market like we did, and you say, here's a piece of land, we would like 1,000 social housing units built on it. You can use it for a mixed-use developer. You must partner with a social housing company. And when the building is done or the development is done, we don't want to see that this is the poor people's building and this is the rich people's building. Must be tenure blind. When you do that, like we did in 2018, you put out 5 pieces of land and you get a competitive bid on every single one of them. It's feasible. Surely it's feasible if the market responds and says, we can do this. So you don't need to spend 6 years doing a feasibility study in order to re-release land. I want to address that. Then let's just talk about the apartheid city. It hasn't changed since the Group Areas Act was introduced. Just close your eyes, remove all the people of the city of Cape Town. Just remove the people so you can't see the color. And drive through the city of Cape Town. You can tell the white areas, the colored areas, and the African black areas. You can tell by looking at the roads. You can tell by looking at the housing. You can tell by looking at the parks. You can tell by looking at the social amenities. You can tell by looking at whether there's any retail or commercial activity. That hasn't changed.
surely part of our plan has to be not only allowing people to move to better locations, but improving the locations where they are currently living. And that means we have to say we have a disparity in infrastructure in our city, and our obligation is to decide this is the standard of infrastructure we want, and we're going to upgrade all of the communities that don't meet that standard. Then we have to use our planning powers, and I must tell you, I am really, really frustrated and disappointed with organizations and urbanists who are clapping like seals for the City of Cape Town's latest municipal planning bylaw amendment, because the mayor happened to put affordable in front of a program called micro rental unit flats, or whatever they're called, affordable rental flats. What they've done is rezone all of the group areas at apartheid townships to allow, as of right, residents, owners to build 8 to 12 flats that are 20 square meters large in those areas, but in those areas only. That goes against every single policy that exists in the city. It goes against the spatial planning framework, which says that we have the densities of people, the residential densities and the economic densities in the wrong place. Now we're going to entrench it. We're going to say those places that are densely populated, you are going to be more populated by people building next door to you 12 flats that are 20 square meters. Do that in a white area. Do that in a white area and tell me as a homeowner in a white area that my neighbor can suddenly build 12 flats, and you'll see the outrage. But this city has done it in all these areas that are black and brown, and people who are supposed to know are clapping like seals. Finally, we have to address this occupation thing, this so-called unlawful occupation thing. When does the DA say an unlawful occupation is no longer unlawful and therefore we will upgrade it? Because they won't talk to the people who live in AKH or Sissypool because they are unlawful occupiers, they're criminals. But they're upgrading informal settlements. Surely those settlements were occupied unlawfully when they were started. So at what stage does an unlawful occupation become an occupation that we will now talk to the residents and start upgrading? At what stage? Where does the occupation become something that we will engage with? Come on now. 8 years? Is 8 years not long enough to start talking to those people? You are not going to be able to evict 900 people from AKH or 800 families from Sissypool. It's not going to happen. Talk to those people. Finally, on the Expropriation Act, I have to address this. It is not true that we can only expropriate without compensation or with nil compensation when land has been abandoned. We have to take into account how the land has been acquired and how the land has been used. And I will give you 2 examples. Cheswin mentioned one already. The Indabeni Trust land in Wingfield. Why did we expropriate it? It's not being used by the Indabeni Trust as it was intended to be used. The Cape Sun Hostel in Guguletu, where people are living in dire conditions. That hostel was built for migrant labourers to build the Cape Sun Hotel. The people who built it made their money from the apartheid government and from the migrant labour system. The people who are living there have long ago been abandoned by the owners of that building. But the city can't touch it because it's private property. Expropriated.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Just to say that I will share with Tifunu Kwazi and others the email address for a service delivery initiative that we have started as the ANC, where people, whether it's a councillor, a community, a street committee member, can contact the ANC directly. We're very much aware of both where we govern and where we're in opposition, where we are failing, and this is a direct way of contacting the organisation. basic.services@anc1912.org.za. This debate shows that the key issues are land, financing for hand. Sorry, I'll give the number again later. Okay, to the organisers after lunch. It's about land, and that land we know is state land, national, provincial, municipal land. Then it is parastatal land. Carla, just please tell the mayor that the Prasa land in Goodwood is not city land that was made available for human settlements. Actually, Prasa. national state of enterprise land. And then it's obviously private land. Private land should not be excluded in all of this. I'm not sure, and I saw Ivan Turok and there are others here, that they authored a document called Releasing Municipal Land for Affordable Housing. I'm not sure if the summit has actually seen that or looked at it. But one of the things there which I think can lead to a practical role for our members of parliament who are lawmakers is the Municipal Finance Management Act. The way that it's written at the moment doesn't actually oblige the city to make land available at a low cost. There's not even a threshold to say 10% of the market value or at cost. So what is happening, because some municipalities are under pressure in regard to their own finances, that they sell well-located land that belongs to the city at the highest bidder. And the MFMA, the Municipal Finance Management Act, is actually the act that needs to be amended. And I think someone referred to the local government white paper process. I think that also is something where we can look at that. In this report that I'm referring to, what was also, and people have talked about social housing here, social housing seems to have a limit of 4 stories, because in terms of the subsidy and the costs, etc., it's very difficult to even do more than 4 stories. Now, there was a person from Woodstock, Burkhardt, for instance, who talked about pieces of land there. There are pockets of land, there are bowling greens that aren't used all around the city. The issue of the golf courses, Difunukwazi and others have raised it. What I'm trying to say is, if you really want to deal with the spatial inequality, we're going to have special funding to go 10 stories, 15 stories. The only issue, and I've been speaking to social housing people, when you go to 4 stories, you need a lift. And obviously that's expensive, because our country, in terms of manufacturing, apparently we have to import. So maybe that even can open up an industry. But if we are serious, we put in extra money because foundations cost more, we go higher and cover the cost of what it means to make those places accessible with lifts. How else are we going to deal with the scale of redress that we actually need in the inner city? And then to conclude, just 3 proposals to the summit. Maybe you know or you don't know that there's something called a district development model. Now the President has appointed 4 ministers to Cape Town. And I was wondering whether Difunukwazi, Seri and the others have actually asked for a meeting with those district champions who specifically look at urban land justice in the urban context. Barbara Creasy, the Minister of Transport, John Steenhuisen, the Minister of Agriculture, Thandi Mahambetlala, the Deputy Minister of Human Settlements, and also Andries Snell. Those are the DDM champions. Surely in Joburg, Cape Town, there are different champions there. This kind of initiative says, we've had this conference, these are our findings, can you as the champions, because in the district the Premier is supposed to be there, the Mayor is supposed to be there, and we need to look at going beyond the politics of megaphones. I agree at that level. Let's talk about these things, but take these proposals to the district development champions. Secondly, the national dialogue, whatever we think about it, we've had a convention and the dialogue is now starting. I would argue that the resolutions of a summit like this, there can be requests to the organizing committee to have a specific dialogue on land release in the urban context, and also involve in that context the presidency project, the Vulindlela project, which is also looking at opening up the access to land. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it's work that organizations like SERI, DAG, NU do on the ground, campaigning, putting pressure to make sure, and the issues I haven't had time for is inclusionary housing. We really need to look at that issue. But ultimately we need activists and civil society to make everyone accountable, whether you're a DA Maker member, an ANC MP, whoever. We support democracy, we've elected people. People must be accountable, irrespective of parties. And at the end of the day, voters must judge us. That's the ultimate test of accountability. Viva the Expropriation Act, viva!
Thanks, Mazibuko. I think let me just focus on some of the specific questions raised in the crowd and then looking at proposals. So, I've treated a development plan for the city-owned parcels within the broader Drift Sands area. Greenpoint, Los Angeles, Sipokama. And I think what I take away from this is, and what we'll discuss once I leave the stage, is how do we connect with active players, which I found here, to make sure that development plan speaks to what you actually want in those city-owned spaces. I take the point around what is being offered in my counterpart in the province, MEC Simba's space, and I think that requires a dialogue, noting that you can only do in that space with what it provides. And we know what the pressures are within Just Sands. But I take the point, and I'll take it to MEC Simmers as well. On COVID, I think there is a leadership gap within the broader COVID. And so I would love to get the contact details of Mayor Pumeza and the colleagues around what we are currently planning in terms of making sure, one, basic services is provided within COVID. I absolutely agree, there's no need to debate it, and it's time for us to now act within this financial year. Jackie has raised a point around the Boerkaap. I'm not aware of it, so I would be happy to schedule between yourselves and Dad and myself around what that development proposal is, what land parcels are being considered, so no objection from my side. If it is feasible, let's do it, and let's actually deliver a housing opportunity that can add value to the Boerkaap and those who need it most. I think everyone agrees with what Honorable Abada said in terms of play politics where politics is meant to be, but when we're actually dealing with the issues of our people, let's be solutions focused. I think one concept which I've raised with you at the committee is we need to move away from corrugated iron structures and say, you know what, we've only got this funding structure. Why aren't we looking at innovative and alternative building technologies with titled urban, dignified structures in terms of those typologies, and people then being allowed to progress from there in an owned space within our framework. So I'm on the same page with you 100%. The issue around Winnie Madikizela, we must chat after this, colleague, because between AXA, National DPWI, and the city, we know that you are one of the best settlements in closing the N2, so we've triggered a conversation with you. It needs to be serviced. There is just implications around where we put those services, around AXA expanding the airport. But that is underway, so let's exchange details, because clearly enough people from the community is not at the table. And we need to correct that with MMC budgeting for water and sanitation. I'd love a copy of the book from NU on the parking lots. I'm not making excuses for Alan. I've seen your video on Instagram. You've dealt with him at the first Thursday. But perhaps just an alternative view, not discounting the issues on the parking lots. At the end of the day, the province has undertaken a pipeline. I don't think Alan disagrees that the parking lots must be in that pipeline, but they've currently prioritized Nieuwloop, Founders Garden, Tafelberg, with your pressure, by the way, to release for affordable housing and to develop. And so I think that the question we need to ask ourselves is, how do we prioritize and accelerate that pipeline based on the proposals from NU? So I'm happy to facilitate that conversation as well if you are struggling with the province. A last point before, just two proposals raised around Alan Bowden. Let me just offer the solution, because the province is dealing with a development proposal for Alan Bowden. That's a conversation that must take place by them. I think one of the big outcomes from this for me is, one, we need to make sure that between HDA, ourselves, and the national department, that we put together an urgent development plan for the SABC precinct. You took ownership of that. We know you can't develop it on your own, but that is the answer to access to social and affordable housing for particularly domestic workers, as you've raised in Sea Point. I think it's a big opportunity for us to undertake. Two, we need to agree that the current funding model for SHRA doesn't work. Let's go back to what worked before in terms of adding it to the Division of Revenue Act, make it a grant to the Metro, and albeit not enough, the 7 parcels that are currently with developers and SHIs for 5,000 units in the inner city can now be developed. I think let's agree on that second proposal and advocate collectively on that. Thirdly, let's agree that we now need to also unlock, I'm not disagreeing on the inner city, etc., the catalytic parcels in the city of Cape Town. Luckily, one of the benefits from the GMU cabinet is that there is currently a recommendation to release Wingfield for development. I must give credit to both Minister McPherson and Minister Simelane, who has taken that up. But there's more. Why are we not expropriating Easterplaat and Youngsfield from the... No, relax. No, relax, just hold on. Listen. Why do we not expropriate Easterplaat and Youngsfield from the Telegraaf Trust, and we can give just and equitable compensation as there is case law for it. Listen to me, in your state we don't support, but we've never been against expropriation. What we are saying is that there is state land that can first be utilized before we move to private land. And if you disagree with that, then it's foolish, because 100,000 opportunities exist in Cape Town on state-owned land. Why would we ignore it? No, don't take my time, Kevin. I don't think...
You start with giving services to AKH. Give services to AKH. Services to AKH.
Okay. Let's wrap it up with more sense.
Manja! Comrades, I think one of the important things that we must deal with here, we must not normalize abnormal circumstances. It can't be, comrades, that the state is saying that they're moving away from the delivery of top structures to sites and services, and we do not ask questions. But by the way, before I move, I think all of us can agree here that there is a jazz musician, Comrade Maz, called Mandisi Junkies. And Mandisi says that ziyafana zonke, zingabamenemene zonke. And we hope that one day, comrades, that people will rise and take back their power, because we're subjected to mediocre in terms of the political parties that we have. And maybe we need to think about the viable alternative. Comrades, but I want to deal with this thing. In terms of, we're saying that we have a crisis. 1998 we had about 300 informal settlements. Today we have about 3,000 informal settlements in this country. And all of us agree, Comrade Pumeza, that that's a life of indignity that our people are subjected to. And now they're saying that they're providing sites and services without telling us whether the economic opportunities that will be made to subsidize that. Now we've been saying here, Comrade Carl, when we're saying that we're piecing, we've been saying here that we need to think of pragmatic solutions in terms of how to deal with this particular crisis. If you're saying that we're giving people sites and services, let's subsidize them. And part of the things that we need to be thinking about is that there is disparities, there's inequality in this country, and we need to think about mention tax to cross-subsidize for affordable housing, to subsidize these sites and services so that people can be built homes. And what people are wanting is homes. We're not going to live in informal settlements, we're not going to live in shacks or whatever. That's not a life of dignity, comrades, that we're fighting for. But lastly, comrades, is that part of the pragmatic solutions, Carl, is that you are saying here that you are not criminalizing poor people. The Democratic Alliance is currently fighting for the erosion of power, so that they can criminalize Abandabamnyama and poor people. Currently in this city of Cape Town, comrades, a homeless person is being fined 1,000 rands for being homeless. That's criminalization of people, and we cannot allow for that to happen. And Makoban, one of the things that are important, I think everyone has spoken about occupations. Occupations must be seen as alternatives, Carl. You have a housing crisis that you have no solution for. 3.7 million people are in the backlog, and there is no solution. And 28,000 people annually, there's a shortfall of 28,000 annually of people that, of the delivery of housing. And you can't contribute then to the homeless crisis that we have through evicting people. Let's see occupations as lived alternative and regularize occupations. That's what Brazil is doing. What is the problem of doing that here in the city of Cape Town? Why can't we say that these occupations that people are living in will redevelop them, will make them habitable for people, and people can remain in these occupations after they are redeveloped. We can't, comrades, say that people must be evicted from these occupations. If that happens, the occupation of AKH and Sisikul House, if they succeed, Jokal and his friends, those will be the largest evictions since the dawn of democracy, since District 6. And we should never allow that to happen, Makaban, not during this right time. Not going right here. So if it won't happen, Carl, if it won't happen, you must commit to the people here in this room. You must say this because you're saying to me. You must say to people, give me a mic after I'm done talking, Comrade Mas. This mic is going to him, not to you. He must say this, that he's saying to me that it won't happen. He whispered that. He must say that to the residents of Sisulu House that are here. He must say that to the residents of AKH that are here. And the residents of Singabalapa that are here. He must tell them that we will not evict them. So that's what we want to hear. Otherwise, an eviction is not something that is going to happen. By the way, comrades, we are going to 2026 local government elections. And by the way, all of them, they must know, comrades, that people hold the power. Comrades, they must know that we will not only judge them on the local government elections, but we condemn them if they are condemning us now. They must know, comrades, that people hold the power and we will not let history judge them. History is already judging them. We will condemn them during the elections in 2026. So this, my Comrade Mas, is not going to me. It's going to Khan. But also the last commitment, Mas, that I wanted to make is that on the 11th of September, all these political parties, on the 11th of September, the communities from Ekailicha, the communities from Delft that form part of what we call Solidarity Space are convening what we call a World Councillors in Bizo, in Kailicha, in New Way Hall. And now we'll give all of you in the mic, comrades, to make a commitment, 30 seconds, all of them. So, comrades, the communities, I'm saying that we're going to 2026, the communities are inviting the World Councillors. All of your parties are represented in council. So we need a commitment from each of you that will all your councillors go to the World Councillors in Bizo on the 11th of September. So Khan, we'll deal with you, the election matter, and then a commitment in terms of the World Councillors in Bizo.
Thanks to the booklet. One, I can commit to what I have control over. One, there won't be a massive eviction at Woodstock Hospital. Two, send us the invite to Mbizo and we'll try and be there. I'm not committing on other people's behalf, but there's no reason why we should do it. I'll participate, I'll speak for myself.
He seems to have taken over. I can commit to myself being there. We have a regional secretary, Vusim Dala. We have a chief whip in the city of Cape Town. We will convey and urge everyone to be at that meeting. That's what I'll do. But I can guarantee that I myself will be there. I think push their nose that the third party will be there.
The EFF will be present.
The PA will be there.
But we will be there. We will be there.
I've never seen such a disempowered chair. Thank you very much to the political parties. Thanks to everyone in the room. Thanks to Moshe. This was a heated but actually quite useful discussion. A lot of proposals have come forward. Maybe Paul and you colleagues and other organizers of the event, we didn't get to the point of a charter. I don't think it's a problem. I think we've laid quite a lot of groundwork. As Cameron was suggesting, perhaps in the spirit of the national dialogue, we could then convene a specific further dialogue that takes us towards the point of an agreement, hopefully, without promoting the ANC. But what Cameron was saying, here is the email address, basic.services@anc1912.org.za. So colleagues, thank you very much. We didn't catch up with the 40 minutes we were behind with. Now basic.services services. Basic dot services at ANC1912.org.za. I'll hand over, colleagues, to the NU team. Thanks for making my life difficult.